I am the pastor here, and it is wonderful to have Doug Padgett and the Vote Common Good gang here for the Confronting Christian Nationalism tour. We did this back in 2022 on a very rainy October night, and a few people showed up that were curious about this Christian nationalism thing, but I can already see we have more people here tonight than we had on that rainy night in October because everyone is talking about it. And so I was delighted to be able to get with Rob and schedule them to come back here so that we can talk more about this as it is on everyone's mind right now. So thank you, Doug. Thank you, gang, for coming. We're excited. There'll be some music, and you're going to learn a lot about what Christian nationalism is and how do we respond in love as Christians. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Well, hey everybody, my name's Dan, and so glad to be with you. We're going to start with an old protest song from the 60s, and if you know it, feel free to sing along. There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I've got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Bad lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds and getting so much resistance from behind. Think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 10,000 people in the streets, singing songs and carrying signs. They mostly say hooray for our side. Sound familiar? Think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. And this next line is just a little too accurate. Paranoia strikes deep. Into your life it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. Think it's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Ryerson. I am from Northwest Arkansas, and happy to be in Pennsylvania with all of you this evening. Got here on that big bus outside. I don't know if you noticed that thing on your way in. People tend to notice the big orange and blue bus as we're heading down the road. We're going to invite you to go out and sign the bus later because we'd love to take you with us on our trips around the country. The other day we were sitting on the bus, and when you travel the country in a big bus that has been wrapped like that for people to notice, you talk about other buses that are out there, and did you see this? And we were talking about some buses that we happened to see when we were in Milwaukee at the Republican National Convention, and showing pictures, looking at the buses. It reminds me a little bit of that phenomenon, and maybe you've had this. Have you ever had the experience where you buy a new car and you think like, oh, I'm special, this is great, like this new car of mine, and then you drive home, and pretty much everywhere you drive, all you do is see that same car everywhere. Right. Have you had this experience? You never noticed that car before, and now you're like, I'm not special anymore. We're going to talk to you about Christian nationalism tonight, and it might be a little bit like that experience with the car. Once you kind of understand what Christian nationalism is all about, you understand the on-ramps of why people become Christian nationalists, you understand what the themes and the verbiage and the lexicon of Christian nationalism is, you might very well begin to see it in all sorts of places that you didn't expect. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Joel. Yeah. So, I like that.
I'll be your amen.
I appreciate that. I didn't know I had a hype man. That's awesome. So let me give you a couple of examples. Maybe you didn't expect to see Christian nationalism in the outcry about the opening ceremonies to the Summer Olympics in Paris. But all of a sudden there was like this religious motivation for what countries ought to be doing or not doing. Maybe you begin to recognize or see Christian nationalism when you are at a high school football game and coach heads out onto the field to lead a prayer that's offered often in Jesus' name. Maybe you begin to see Christian nationalism when you're at a church service and veterans are invited to stand up and to be honored for their service, and then instead of the hymns being sung, the anthems of each of the branches of the service are sung as a part of the worship service. And before you go, oh, that would never happen, I literally sat in a church service where that happened. Yep. And it was the last time I went to that church. Maybe you'll begin to recognize Christian nationalism when a Democrat for office, maybe even president, stands up and says, let me quote to you the words of Jesus from Matthew 25. When you've done it unto the least of these, my brothers, you've done it unto me. Those words, you remember them? And that's the reason why we need to have policies that do X, Y, and Z. Take care of the poor. You thought we were just going to pick on Republicans tonight? See, this Christian nationalism thing, it has this way of seeping into everything. One of our goals tonight is to help you recognize Christian nationalism and to see the ways that it's really, really dangerous when a person's personal faith becomes the basis or the rationale for public policy. And that refers to anybody's personal faith. When a person's personal faith becomes the rationale for or the basis for public policy, that's when we've crossed a line into something that is pretty dangerous. And so we're going to help you recognize that tonight. Now, I want to be really clear. Our goal tonight is not to suggest in any way, shape, or form that people of faith should not practice their faith in public. In fact, we would say just the opposite. People should express their faith in ways that are consistent with faith, hope, and love, and the beliefs that they have. Absolutely. But what we're suggesting is that faith should not be that personal faith should not be the basis for public policy. Because when it happens that way, when that happens, things get little dangerous and a little dicey. Let me give you one more example. I remember growing up, there was always, this kind of little trivia thing, or people would say like, "Hey, what's the longest word in the dictionary?" Do you remember this? I don't even know. Do we even have dictionaries anymore? Anybody remember like the longest word in the dictionary? Yeah, there we go. Everybody knows it. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. It's the longest word in the dictionary. I don't know if it is anymore or not, but anti-disestablishmentarianism. Do you know that that's Christian nationalism? Did you know this? So there was a movement in England. The Church of England is the established religion of the state, the country of England. And so it was the established religion. There was a group of people who wanted to disestablish the church from the state, and the backlash to the people who wanted to disestablish the church from the state were called anti-disestablishmentarianism, was that belief. Anti-disestablishmentarianism is Christian nationalism. See, once you begin to recognize it, you see it everywhere. Just like that new car. Just like that big orange bus out there. And it is, does all this make sense? You with me? You tracking? So, I get the real privilege of being able to welcome tonight the newest member of our merry band of common do-gooders who travel around the country. You've heard from him already, but now he's going to sing for you again. This is Joel Hubert.
Thank you. I just joined the tour a couple of hours ago. A true story. Drove down from Syracuse, New York today, and it was the first time I think I've ever driven through Pennsylvania that it was not raining. So that was pretty cool. As you can tell, I was raised Pentecostal, if you couldn't tell by my little amen corner. I'm holding back right now because we're an Episcopal church and trying to honor the house. And okay. Well, I'm going to invite you to get just a little bit Pentecostal. I wrote this song a few years ago, and I grew up reading the Bible. I grew up very, actually, what I would now call Christian nationalist. Mike Johnson doesn't surprise me. Marjorie Taylor Greene does not surprise me. I grew up like that. Those are my parents, my pastors. But the farther away I get from it, the more I can't let go of the stories in the Bible. There's the beauty in these characters that just fight empire and stand up for what is right, regardless of cost. And that's what this song is about. I want the faith of these people. I don't want the faith of my fathers. that bombs, segregates, and enslaves, that uses Scripture as a weapon. If you're a woman, immigrant, or gay, I don't want the faith of my mothers, silent while men hang from a tree. I see in Christ a clear reflection, a love beyond our wildest dreams. So do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Would you try singing that with me? Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. I want the faith of Moses, the kind that sets the captive free. I want the faith of Naomi, lifting the ones who are weak. I want the faith of Mary, holding the mystery deep inside. But most of all, I want the faith of Jesus and His grace, turning darkness into light. Down through the ages we've seen it, religion turning into hate, becoming a partner for violence, to war and steal and take. But when I read of the God of love, who rescues even enemies, there's something in me that rises up. Come be that hope in me. I want the faith of Joseph, forgiving those who do me wrong. I want the faith of Hannah, turning my grieving into song. I want the faith of Deborah, leading a nation out of shame. But most of all, I want to run to see your kingdom come, rolling the stone of death away. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Do justly, and do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. I want the faith of Esther, confronting hate, not backing down. I want the faith of Tamar, the courage to speak the truth to power. I want the faith of Hagar, naming the God who sees and hears. But most of all, I want to be like the one who died for me, the love that's casting out all fear. I want the faith of Martin,
like the one who died for me, the love that's making all things new.
Thank you.
I'm not crying, you're crying. I'm not crying. Hey, my name is Doug. Thank you, Joel. Maybe you heard Rob say that Joel's our newest member, and he said he just joined us this morning. He did. Drove down. We met a couple of weeks ago in North Carolina, and now he's here. So we have a little part in our presentation where we say we have a Harvey Milk moment, which some of you know what that means, and if you don't worry about it. But we have a Harvey Milk moment because we say we're here to recruit you. We want you going along with us. So maybe you're going to sit at a piano and play. Maybe you're going to write a song. Really good. We need to sing some new songs about all this stuff. We're going to talk about Christian nationalism tonight. We have 3 big questions that we're going to try to address. One of them is, why is Christian nationalism attractive to people? Why in surveys do more than 50% of our fellow Americans say that they prefer a Christian nationalist country? What is it? What are they up to? They're us, we're them. Some of us, they're in our families. It's true for me. My son's a Christian nationalist. Any of the rest of you have family members? We're not talking about others. We're talking about people we know and love, people right down the street, people that come over to our house, people that are the parents of my grandchildren. You know what I'm talking about. What is it that's attractive? We want to help you understand it. Now, a couple things about that. I have a number of friends that are Christian nationalists that help me think about this because we travel around the country and talk about Christian nationalism, right? And I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor my whole adult life, so I spend a lot of time in Christianity. Rob is a pastor. Dan's a former worship leader. Joel's a worship leader. We have women and men that travel with us and speak, and pastors and people involved in church. Like, we're really into Christian stuff. We drive around in a bus that says faith, hope, and love, supporting democracy for all and standing against Christian nationalism. We're into this, but we want to try to understand, what do people who see it differently think? So I have 2 friends that are both former pastors. One of them still is a pastor, who are Christian nationalists. So I ask them to check me all the time. And I always try to imagine them sitting right here. I imagine them sitting right listening to me. And anything I say about Christian nationalism, I want to be able to look over in my imagination and have Casey nod his head and say, yep, you got that right. If I'm talking about what he thinks, I want to make sure he says you've got me right. There's no need for us to exaggerate Christian nationalism. There's no need to overstate. What they're saying is problematic enough for a lot of us to cause some of us to travel the country, talk about this and a whole lot of other things. We talk about a lot of other things other than this, but we spend a lot of time on this topic as well. And it's enough to get you out here tonight. It's enough for people to produce a film called God and Country, which if you haven't seen it yet, is fantastic. It's worth watching. Produced by Rob Reiner. Why are we all talking about Christian nationalism? Because it's really a thing, and it's really threatening. But we're going to do everything we can to not overstate. And I'm going to do everything I can as one of the prime presenters tonight to try to give you an alternative to the views that Christian nationalists hold. So we want you to have a real sense of why is it attractive. And then what can organizations do? What can churches do? What can religious groups do? What can civic organizations do? And then what can individuals do? How can we move forward in this country? How can we find a pathway forward where we're not just scared and we're not playing the game of 50% plus 1 so we have more power than they have? Now, I'm hoping people that vote the way I do are going to win this election. I'm ready for Camelot. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'd be very happy with that. And I hope that people win the elections that I want. We travel the country, we meet with candidates, we introduce them to voters, do all that kind of stuff. But we need a future that's more than just we win this time, you win next time, and a seesaw of fear and power. And Christian nationalism is based all around a political movement of power. It uses Christianity, but it's primarily about political power. So, we're going to try to engage in this at a sophisticated level. Now, we're going to show you some video. You're going to hear from a lot of Christian nationalists. One of the ways we're going to try to help you understand what Christian nationalists believe is for you to hear them and to see them. We think it's the best way. This might be familiar to you. This is a scene that happened on January 6, 2021, when a group of people sent by the then President of the United States attacked the United States Capitol in order to stop the certification of the 2020 election. These people are standing in the Senate dais. They have taken it over. This person is about to explain to this Capitol Police officer that the crowd goes all the way back to the monuments, and then they are going to pray a prayer of thanksgiving that Jesus allowed them to take over the Capitol. By the way, the actions on January 6th were funded in dollars and in imagination by Christian nationalists. The night before, on the 5th, and the day before that on the 4th, Christian groups had organized things called Jericho marches around the Capitol, to march around the Capitol invoking the biblical narrative of walking around the walls of Jericho so that the power structures would come collapsing down. And then on that Wednesday, they sent them attacking the Capitol with signs, with banners, and with these prayers in their heart. If you've seen this already, you know it can be disturbing to hear. If you haven't heard it, I'll just tell you it's a little disturbing to hear what's going on here, especially if you come from a Christian background. These things seem familiar to you. So, from the United States Senate Capitol dais on January 6th.
All the way back to the monument of D.C. Jesus Christ, we invoke your name. Amen. Amen.
Let's all say a prayer in this sacred space. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for gracing us with this opportunity. Thank you. Let me take it back. Thank you, Heavenly Father.
Amen.
For this opportunity to stand up for our God-given unalienable rights. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us in this building, to allow us to exercise our rights, to allow us to send a message to all the tyrants, the communists, and the globalists, that this is our nation, not theirs. Yes. That we will not allow the American way of the United States of America to go down. Thank you, divine, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent Creator God, for filling this chamber with your white light of love, with your white light of harmony. Thank you for filling this chamber with patriots that love you and that love Christ. Yes. Thank you, divine, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent Creator God, for blessing each and every one of us here and now. Amen. Thank you, divine Creator God, for surrounding and filling us with your divine, omnipresent white light of love and protection, peace and harmony. Thank you for allowing the United States of America to be reborn. Thank you for allowing us to get rid of the communists, the globalists, and the traitors within our government. We love you and we thank you. In Christ's holy name we pray. Amen.
These Christian nationalists were not kidding around. That person's name is Jason Chansley. You might know him better known as the QAnon shaman. Went to prison for these activities, convicted of his crimes, the people standing with him as well. Jason Chansley is running for Congress in Arizona. This is a feature of his campaign, not a flaw in his thinking. Christian nationalists have no apologies for the insurrection. It's what they wanted to do, it's what they plan to do, and we're going to show you reasons why they plan to do it. Now, we're going to ask you to engage with empathy and ways of engagement and curiosity when it comes to Christian nationalism. This can be hard, but put on whatever mode of thinking gets you into deeper level of empathy that causes you to want to engage more with curiosity about why this is going on. And we'll advise you to consider 3 questions that might help you do that. One of them is, what do people believe? And really ask yourself, what is going on? What do they believe? If you have Christian nationalist friends or neighbors or acquaintances, or you see people online, really ask yourself, what is it that they're saying? And try to hear it. It's not catchy. You're not going to be allergic to it, but hear them what they're saying. Because the more you know, the better equipped you will be to help them when they recognize that they want to think differently. And the reason we travel the country is not to scare people. There's plenty of reasons to be scared and plenty of places to get scared. It's to remind all of us that everybody's, I'm going to borrow a biblical metaphor here, it's an old preacher trick. People have their own road to Damascus that they're walking down. And every once in a while, the light hits their eyes. And they're like, oh, maybe the thing I'm doing is not the thing I want to be doing. And a bunch of Sauls become Pauls. What do they believe? Why do they believe it? Where does it come from? Personal confession here, this part is just absolutely the most frustrating to me. When I talk to Christian nationalists, spend a lot of time around them, I'm like, it's like Freaky Friday with you people. It's just opposite every time. Like, no, so it is a maddening process, and my personal temperament and personality gets really triggered by that. I'm okay talking about what they believe, but when they start talking about why, I'm like, oh my goodness. And then all my little fight, impulses come up. So this can be a hard one. I quickly have to get to the third, and that is, what role does this belief perform in your life? What does it do for you to be a Christian nationalist? How does it function? See, we have a lot of kinds of beliefs. We have beliefs that are very casual. We have beliefs that are long held and very unconsidered. And we have beliefs that function in ways that make our lives make sense. Like maybe what football team you think is the best football team, or what brand of cereal is really great, are things you don't really care about. But how you understand yourself in your family, or what your job has been in the world, or what contribution you make, or what illness you've had to live with, beliefs that form around that kind of topic, they become really functional in your life, doing something that more casual beliefs don't. So it's really helpful when someone's a Christian nationalist to ask yourself, what's it doing for you to have that kind of belief? Because once you know that, then the great Fred Rogers thing can kick in. If you really knew a person's story, you couldn't help but love them with your whole heart, he used to say, right? So I like that kind of idea. That's some deep empathy. And if we can get there, it may not change their minds. I'll tell you, as people that travel around the country doing the work we do, we don't try to change people's minds. We try to work with people whose minds are already changing, and they don't know what to do about it. And there's a lot of people who are becoming really uncomfortable with Christian nationalism. A lot of other people that are doubling and tripling down, but a lot of people that are feeling really shaky and they don't know who to trust anymore. Those are people we can all help. But the biggest reason to engage in empathy is it's a salve to your own heart. It really helps. I'm one of those people that has those spots on my face that are like pre-cancer. Anybody else get those things in your face? Your dermatologist is like, you don't have cancer, you have pre-cancer. And I'm like, but am I a pre-cancer survivor then? I don't really know. But anyway, I had to have one frozen the other day by my eye. So if we talk later, you'll see it. And you'll act like you're not seeing it. But I know you're looking at it because it's giant. I shot it with like nitrogen and now it bubbled up and got a big blister. And I got one on my arm, a big blister on here. Well, one of the things that you do is you put this aquifer on there. You know what aquifer is? That stuff you get, it's like Vaseline sort of. You put it on there because it softens it and it allows it to heal. Empathy functions like that. It might not change the other person's mind, but it might soften that blister that feels like it's on your face and starts to crack and hurt. So we hope you leave here tonight encouraged. You're going to get a little spooked, I promise you. You're going to get a little triggered by what you're going to hear people say, because it can feel a little nutty. But the goal is not to scare you. This goal is to encourage you to consider, what could this mean? Rob made this point well, so I'll just reiterate it. Christian nationalism is not about people exercising their faith in public. Please do, all of us. In fact, let's not tell people to be quiet. Let's tell one another to speak up and tell everything we've got to say, right? We need more people speaking up, not more people being quiet. But what Christian nationalism is, it's about the government advocating for, deriving its authority as the government from, or granting privilege to the Christian faith. That's what Christian nationalism is. Not individuals or groups expressing themselves in public. It's when the government decides that it's going to be on the side of Christianity, or say that we gain our authority from Christianity, or it is our job to be sure that Christians are advocated for. Now, in other nations, religious nationalism happens under other religions. There's a Hindu national movement. There's Buddhist national movements. There's Jewish national movements. So religious nationalism is a thing. Some nations like it, prefer it, and make it part of their religious and political code. In the United States, we decided to have a non-establishment clause in the very First Amendment. Government shall establish no religion. Not everybody agreed with it when it was written, and not everybody agrees with it now, and that's at the root and the core of it. Now, there's another side to Christian nationalism that if we're just talking to pastors, it would be, when does the nation come into your Christianity? We're not going to spend as much time talking about that particular issue. What's its effect on Christianity, other than to say it's really bad? Christianity makes a very bad political movement. It's not made for it. But religion, when it becomes part of what gives the government its power, or the government exists to give a religion its power, that's where it has a particular problem. And you might think people are not explicitly asking for it. Well, that's what we're here to show you, how they are and why they are. So, this question of what do we do with faith and politics is deeply embedded in the American experience. Depending on when you say America started, you could answer the question, did America start as a Christian nation, in two different ways? If you start it with the Puritans coming to this land in order to create Christian enclaves, I don't know, in like a state. Could you imagine a state that may have existed so that religious people could have religious protection from other people, and you had to have a religious requirement for people to function in that state or in particular areas of the state? Could you conjure that up in your mind, people in Hershey, Pennsylvania? Because if not, you could visit us when we were over in Nazareth, Pennsylvania yesterday, or in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, literally named for Nazareth and Bethlehem. And the Moravians had Moravian laws about who could be a person that could own property in those areas. If you start there, you could say we started as a Christian nation. But if you start when we had a declaration of independence from a Christian nationalist England, then this country said no to that past and yes to a future without it. So if you're going to engage in the conversation with friends, which you will, it'll come up in the presentation, did we start as a Christian nation? One of the things you have to ask them is, when are you saying we started? Nothing more American than having this conversation. It's in the First Amendment. It existed before. It existed in the 1950s. It existed in the 1860s. It's going to exist in the 2090s. So in other words, nothing weird is happening. This is as American as it gets. We're having to have the same conversations over and over. And some of us like to tell a story that says, they decided it, I believe it, that settles it. Unfortunately, our democracy doesn't work like that. So, this is what we're here to do. We're here to be Americans, asking the very good question, what do we do about faith in our American experience? Now, I will say there's a new variant of Christian nationalism in the United States that is extremely dangerous. It's what sent the people to the Capitol. It's what the new version of Christian nationalism looks like. So if you take COVID variants as a metaphor, you know, the COVID virus is also what gives us the common cold, right? Well, I didn't know that before like 2020 in March, what a COVID virus was. But there's a variant of the COVID virus that then doesn't give you the common cold. It becomes deadly. That variant. And then there were different variants of the COVID-19 virus. The Delta virus, remember that when we had the Delta virus going around and the airline was like, hey, could we change the name of that for a minute? That's killing us here. It's not great. You know, we're already flying people around in little cans. Let's change the name of the Delta variant. So we have all these different names. Well, there's a version of Christian nationalism alive and well today that's different than the one from the 1950s that gave us In God We Trust and our currency. It's different than the one in the 1860s that gave us the narrative that we could separate this nation into two pieces over religion. It's different than the one in 1812. It's different than the one in 1740. Those are all versions of Christian nationalism, and there's a new one. It's actually tied deeply into COVID, it's tied into QAnon, and it's deeply tied into Trumpism and MAGA. It's a new variant of Christian nationalism. We're going to introduce you to the people who are heralding it and why more than 50% of the people in the country hold that. The basic belief is this, of this new variant, that America is anointed by God to convert the world to Christianity. Let that settle in for a minute. that the reason God called the United States of America into being is to be used by God to convert the rest of the world to Christianity. My friend Adam, who's my Christian nationalist friend, in my mind he's sitting right there, he's the one who explicitly explained this to me because he said, I think you're missing a few things about what we think. We're not just worried about converting America. We're not just worried about American laws. We have a global vision to convert the world through the United States, and we want to convert every government. Do you know this thing that happens in the spring in Washington, D.C. called the National Prayer Breakfast? It was started by Christian nationalists with this view in the 1950s. It's been around for a while. The reason they call people from around the world together, government leaders, to come and pray in Washington, D.C., is to raise up leaders in every nation to convert every nation to Christianity. That's what they're up to. Don't underestimate them, that they're simply doing what Benjamin or what Thomas Jefferson wrote to the churches in Virginia to say we should have a separation, a wall of sorts between church and state. That's not their concern. You'll hear Lauren Boebert say, I'm sick and tired of the separation of church and state. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's not even in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and I don't care. That's not our vision. Our vision is world conversion to a certain kind of Christianity. That's what they're up to. So when we start arguing about, well, Thomas Jefferson would have said, they're like, yep, okay, onward and upward, and they want to take over the world. And this idea is that they will use by force, if necessary, to seek to accelerate Jesus' return to earth. So not only is it converting the whole world, it actually has an entire end times kind of narrative to it. So that's what they're up to. So if you wonder, why would someone be attracted? It takes a person's life and gives it global meaning inside the vision of God that will have eternal consequences. That's what they think they're up to. So when you're having a conversation with a friend, that's what they're going to be saying. The divine mission of God will be carried out when true believers seize control of the institutions of the United States government. That is a statement from Christian nationalists. Some of you like taking pictures of that, so I'll step away if you like taking pictures of any of that stuff. By the way, all of this presentation, other presentations are online in lots of versions. We have a podcast version of this thing. We have video versions. We have a curriculum for small groups. There's all kinds of stuff. It's all free. It's all at our websites and all those places. So if you're into any of this or want any of it, we'll be sure to get it to you. Okay. You need to know a little something about what's called the seven mountains. This is called the seven mountains within the theory of Christian nationalists. The idea is that just as Moses went up on the mountain and received the calling of God that came in the form of the commandments and then was put up as the leader of the nation of Israel, there are not just one mountain of Sinai, there are seven mountains of cultural influence. Arts and entertainment, business, education, family, government, media, and religion. And they want to raise up, to convert the world to Christianity, leaders in every nation in all seven areas that they refer to as the seven mountains. The reason Christian nationalists love Donald Trump is they see him as someone who has authority in many of these mountains. I try not to be snarky in this presentation, but they see him as a business leader. They see him as arts and entertainment. He ran a college. He's a great family man. He's led the government. He's in media, and he's a new convert to Christianity. In other words, he's God's man for the job. Okay? This is how it works. This is what they're talking about. We're going to show you the Watchman's decree here in a moment.
Some will.
Sorry, we're going to show you Josh Hawley in a minute. Just really tickling your fancy to get you, a little. If you don't know Josh Hawley yet, you just wait. He's a darling of this world. So here's the Watchmen. The Watchmen are a group of people that put together something called the Watchman Decree. This is at a conference that they're holding. And this is them reading their decree out loud in front of others, proud and streamed on the internet. This is the among the primary leaders of the new variant of Christianity. They're going to mention a guy named Dutch Sheets over on the left. They're going to say, Dutch, you go ahead and read it, because Dutch Sheets, Dutch the first name, Sheets the last name, was the primary articulator of this covenant that they're about to read. Tim back there, who's with us, went to Bible college with Dutch. So these are just people that go to bed at night and lay their head on a pillow and then turn it over and find the cool spot and then say, oh, that feels better, and then they doze off. They're just people with really bad ideas, running it with a lot of money and wanting to push it on America. But they're just people. So here they are, and this is them reading their prayer of declaration. If you want to scan the code, you can download it yourself and read it later for just some fun nighttime reading. It takes about 3.5 minutes, so buckle up.
All right, go ahead. All right, Dutch, lead us. So we'll read it together, okay? As a patriot of faith, I attest my allegiance first and foremost to the kingdom of God and the Great Commission. Secondly, I agree to be a watchman over our nation concerning its people and their rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Whereas we, the church, are God's governing body on the earth. Whereas we have been given legal power from heaven and now exercise our authority. Whereas we are God's ambassadors and spokespeople over the earth. Whereas through the power of God, we are the world influencers. Whereas because of our covenant with God, we are equipped and delegated by Him to destroy every attempted advance of the enemy. We make our declarations. We decree that America's executive branch of government will honor God and defend the Constitution. We decree that our legislative branch, Congress, will write only laws that are righteous and constitutional. We decree that our judicial system will issue rulings that are biblical and constitutional. We declare that we stand against wokeness, the occult, and every evil attempt against our nation. We declare and we now take back our God-given freedoms according to our Constitution. We declare that we take back influence at the local level in our communities. We decree that we take back and permanently control positions of influence and leadership in each of the 7 mountains. We decree that the blood of Jesus covers and protects our nation. It protects and separates us from God. We declare that our nation is energy dependent. We declare that America is strong spiritually, financially, militarily, and technologically. We decree that evil carries no power, authority, or rights in our land or over our people. We decree that we will operate in unity, going beyond denominational lines in order to accomplish the purposes of God for our nation. And we decree that America shall be saved. We know this. You get it more? Here we go.
Now you might hear yourself saying, energy independence? What's next? We will eat more fiber. Funded by the oil industry. They're not kidding around. Now, I know a lot of these guys. They're pretty incapable of pulling this off, but the imagination, the reason they will take over your school boards, the reason they will take over your county commissions, the reason they will stand and cheer for certain political candidates is because they believe this is their narrative. That's what they're up to. They are God's authority on earth to lead the world. So when they say, Are we Christian nationalists? You better believe we are, because that's what we mean. This person here is a senator from Missouri named Josh Hawley. If you don't know Josh Hawley yet, the people who want Christian nationalists to be in charge, the people who run the National Prayer Breakfast, all of those folks are behind Josh Hawley becoming the President of the United States in the next 15 years. This guy is set up as the most important person to lead Christian nationalism from the bumbling nonsense of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump to something more sophisticated. He gave a speech, which you'll see there about national conservatism. This is only 23 seconds of what he says in a longer segment, which you can watch if you want. I don't mean to be rude, but I can't listen to Josh Hawley talk for very long. But this is Josh Hawley talking about Christian nationalism.
Some will say now that I am calling America a Christian nation. And so I am. And some will say that I am advocating Christian nationalism. And so I do.
He then goes on to a long explanation about Augustinianism and how Augustine's vision for the world is something that carries Western civilization, and without Western civilization, you don't have, and he goes on and on and on. Stated United States Senator, who you might remember at the beginning of the insurrection, came out and put his fist up in the air. And by the time they broke in the building, was running for his life. Josh Hawley, advocating for Christian nationalism just a few weeks ago. He's not the only one. A number of other people advocating for Christian nationalism. We're going to show you a little excerpt from a person who ran for Congress in South Texas, in a district that had been won by Democrats for years among Latino people living on and near the border. And Mayra Flores ran with a God, family, country theme and won in a special election, then lost in a general election and is running again. And she ran under a MAGA movement you might have heard of, Make America Godly Again, a Christian nationalist movement. So it caught a bunch of attention. It's her and some of the people around her talking about Christian nationalism. This was on MSNBC a while back. You can watch the whole thing if you want, but it's a nice little introduction to Mayra Flores. Because one of the things that's important is that Christian nationalism is not only advocated by white people. It has an enormous base in charismatic and Pentecostal Latino churches. It has a major amount of support in black churches. Now, they're talking often about a different kind of Christian nationalism. They don't want the whiteness that comes with white Christian nationalism, but they share the Christian nationalism part. So they're negotiating that out. In the Watchman Decree, there was this one little line where he says, where they read, "We will overcome denominational differences in order to accomplish God's purposes for our nation." That's what they're alluding to. Denominational and ethnic and racial biases that exist. Trying to pull it all together. That's what they're up to. So here's a little bit about Mayra Flores.
Flores is running at a time when Republican candidates around the country have called for religion to play a greater role in government. Some of them calling for an end to the separation of church and state. Some of them calling for the U.S. to become an explicitly Christian nation.
We need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists.
The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
We asked Congresswoman Flores for her view of government and religion.
Do you think there should be a separation between church and state?
Well, I believe that the government has no business, getting involved with the church. But I do think that the church does have the right to get involved in the government and letting us know, because again, I believe that the church knows the people better than the government. And that is a fact. But I agree that the government has no business, getting involved with the church. There has to be a separation.
Train of thought, do you support the United States becoming a Christian nationalist country?
Yeah, I do. I believe that we should always put God first.
Okay, a couple things in here, and you're going to hear some more from the people that organized her campaign. There's an interesting thing going on. Maybe you hear it. The government should not tell the church what to do. A lot of that actually has to do with COVID response. A big motivator among a lot of Christian nationalists is when churches, synagogues, mosques were not considered essential parts of society. The liquor store, the airlines, and Home Depot could stay open, but churches couldn't. That really ate away at a lot of people's sensibilities in this world. And it really fired them up. And they talk about it to this day. You'll hear old Michael Flynn here in just a minute telling you about how they're going to come in and shut your churches down. And that was all just a practice run. That's what they believe, that the government wants to take over churches. So they're saying no to government takeover of churches, but churches should direct the government. That's what they want. All of these parts you're going to hear is that the church, religious leaders, the righteous, need to be our leaders, need to lead the government. And then the reporter asked, maybe right there at the end, do you advocate for this becoming a Christian nationalist country? And Representative Flores says, I do. I think we should always put God first. So one of the things that happens with a lot of Christian nationalists who don't really know what's up, they don't have a lot of differentiation between how do we put God first in our families or in our country versus how do we have the religious people of our choosing be the ones who are going to run the government. So they think it means putting God first. That wasn't the question. Do you think we should put God first? Because if you want to put God first, I don't know, you could talk to your imam down the street, you could talk to your rabbi, you could talk to people that hold to a notion of God without personal identity. There's a lot of people that think about God first. Christian nationalism is not concerned about all Christians, it's concerned about one particular version of Christianity having the power. I often joke with my Christian nationalist friends, hey, if you all become leaders at every level of government, could you appoint me to be your Christian nationalist czar? Like, I got an idea of how we could do that. You know, we'd have free universal health care, like Jesus out healing a bunch of people. We'd have free food distribution things. We'd be letting people out of prison. Like, we'd be doing a lot of things if you want me in charge. It's not what they want. It's not about God. It's not about Christianity. It's about a particular religious vision that has a political outcome directing to it. So that's what they're up to. So over and over, they do this kind of thing. Here's another example. This is a county commissioner in Ottawa County, Michigan. This is the western side of Michigan. It's the home of Betsy DeVos and others. This person was being impeached from the county commissioner's office for bad behavior. So she called a press conference as a county commissioner, and in the press conference, as a county commissioner, she led this chant.
Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County.
Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County.
Again.
Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County.
One more time.
Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County.
Now look, I don't know that particular person. She probably believes that Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County. I hope she confesses it every day. Maybe she wants to get in a big bus that drives around and says, Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County. I give her I get it. We drive around a bus that says faith, hope, and love, supporting democracy for all. So, this is America. You should say stuff. Good for her. But not as a county commissioner at a county commissioner's job review before the press as a county commissioner. That's not your job as a county commissioner. One of the things we haven't been very good at in our country is helping all of us figure out which of our identities is going first in public life. We could get better at this, helping each other figure this out, how to speak up and how to do this work. This person you're going to meet is the one who put together Mayra Flores's campaign effort. He's going to talk about why they do what they do, and you're going to hear him talk about the use of Christian nationalism as a political movement, because without a political movement in the Latino churches, there's no way conservatism is going to have a future and win in America, because it's about political wins. He's at least willing to say it.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Bienvenido's Faith Assembly team? How do you all organize?
In 2019, we realized that to better engage and mobilize the Latino voters and to expose the message of conservative policy, the best way to do it was through the churches, because 8 out of 10 times, if a Latino is being outreached through the church, more than likely they believe in some of the conservative platforms, so it's much easier for them to get out and vote Republican.
The Congresswoman started and ended her campaign in the church. How effective was that?
The most effective.
Yeah.
Maya Flores were able to bring that message to South Texas and say, listen, no more church lockdowns, no more harassment and attacks on the church. Get out and vote for someone that will protect religious liberty. And that's why over, I think, 75, a coalition of over plus 75 churches came together and said, we are supporting Maya Flores through our congregation, letting them know who is running for office.
Is that a new strategy? I mean, is it a new strategy to sort of deploy churches and pastors?
The Democrat Party has been doing that with black churches for years and years and years. And it took outside organizations like Bienvenido to come in and tell churches, hey, it is your right to be involved. So if Republicans don't start strategizing with Latino pastors and churches like the Democrats have done for years with the black church, there will be no victory for conservative candidates across the country.
God, family, and country. Why do you think those 3 words resonated so much?
It is,
with Latino specifically,
it is the heartbeat of the Latino community. You can't have moral values without having faith in something, faith in having, understanding that God is, your rights come from God and God only, right? So tying those things into
That's a dangerous thing to say, that your rights come from God and God only. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? Well, I would rather say that my rights come from God than rights come from government. Government can take away my rights. I mean, in the Constitution, we have unalienable rights that come from our Creator, being that we have the opportunity of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That only comes from you understanding that there is a moral conscience, right? And for Latinos, that means believing that our rights come from, our God-given rights come from God and not government. And I think that Congresswoman Maya Flores was able to make that a political campaign.
When I talked to the Congresswoman, she even said that she would support the United States becoming a Christian nationalist country.
Mm-hmm.
Those are her words. Mm-hmm. Do you support something like
100%.
that?
100%.
See, they're not holding back. 100%. It's a political movement. We want to see it happen. God, family, country. That's what it's all about. That's how they're going to win. And it works. People vote for them. It actually works and helps people feel like it's pretty powerful. Christian nationalism, as black and white as we can say it, is a political movement. When we only approach it as a religious movement, or its religious failings, or that it's not part of the full American history, we miss it because it's not the point. The point is that it will be a political movement. We must distinguish between citizens' motivation and the engagement of the government's role and authority to privilege Christianity. One next little reminder, remember this guy? Jeff Sessions. For a while, Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General of the United States of America, Chief Law Enforcement Officer, speaking on behalf of the Justice Department. Stood at this podium. I happened to be watching the news that day because there was a long period of time where I just watched a lot of political news, trying to figure out what to do next. I saw Jeff Sessions say this because he stepped out to give an explanation for why the Trump administration was enforcing something that they referred to as the family separation policy. To separate families at the United States border, parents from children, if you presented yourself for asylum and didn't have a scheduled appointment. The punishment to deter was family separation. And he's going to explain why family separation is a good thing. And he starts with the Apostle Paul.
And I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained the government for his purposes. Orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves. Consistent, fair application of law is in itself a good and moral thing, and that protects the weak. It protects the lawful. Our policies that can result in short-term separation of families is not unusual or unjustified.
Okay, yes, it is unusual. Yes, it is unjustified. Yes, it is un-American. Yes, it is immoral, I would say. Jeff Sessions can stand up and say this is going to be the law of the United States. But when he says, I want to begin by commending to you the Apostle Paul in Romans 13, it doesn't matter the religion. My representative for years has been Ilhan Omar. I'm proud to vote for Ilhan Omar. I'm glad that her Muslim faith motivates her, but I don't want her standing up and saying the reason I'm passing this law is because the Quran says such and such. I don't want Jeff Sessions using the Apostle Paul. I don't want Nancy Pelosi using Matthew 25. We have to find a way to have our laws that are not rooted. Now, Jeff Sessions might be motivated to become the Attorney General because he believes what the Apostle Paul said, and he believes that laws are good in and of themselves. Great motivation. Terrible rationale for passing any law. Good law, bad idea. This is the struggle that we're in. We're not good at figuring out as a nation, what do we do with our personal and collective motivations versus the authority that we give and derive from our government. This is our struggle. So here's the good news. We're in this struggle with our Christian nationalist neighbors and fellow Americans. We're in it together. They're making bold arguments about how they think that struggle should be dealt with. We all also need to make bold statements about how that struggle can be dealt with. We're in the same struggle with two different outcomes. So that's what we're up to. We're going to pivot here in a minute. Dan's going to be our musical transition because too much talking can just be too much talking. And Dan's got a great personal story that I think connects to a lot of people about how these kinds of movements happen and what's happening in the country. And then we're going to talk about what can we do. This is what Christian nationalists hold to. This is how it plays out. This is what they mean. This is what they're up to. They have people at all kinds of level in the government doing it, from the Justice Department to Senate to Congress to county commissioners' offices, political movements. What can we do? We're going to do that after a little musical break and let your mind sort of rest for a little bit and maybe catch a little bit of hope in the midst of it all too. So here's Daniel Dietrich again.
That was the moment when Jeff Sessions said, we're locking up kids, taking them away from their parents because of the Bible, that I thought was going to be the line in the sand where Christians would cry out and say, hey, not in our name. But it didn't happen. Every line in the sand that Donald Trump and his administration crossed, Christians said, yeah, we're into it. And that broke my heart. It made me very mad. And so I put those thoughts and feelings into this song. It's called Hymn to the 81%. It's in reference to the 81% of white evangelicals who voted for Donald Trump. And it's a bit of my story and maybe a bit of your story as well. I grew up in your churches, Sunday morning and evening service. I knelt in tears at the foot of the rugged cross. You taught me every life is sacred. Feed the hungry and clothe the naked. I learned from you the highest law is love. And I believed you when you said I should trust the words in red to guide my steps through a wicked world. I assumed you'd do the same, so imagine my dismay when I watched you lead the sheep straight to the wolves. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth. Well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Oh, they started putting kids in cages, ripping mothers from their babies. And I look to you to speak on their behalf. Oh, but all I heard was silence. Or worse, you justified it, singing glory, hallelujah, raise the flag. See, your fear had turned to hatred, but you baptized it with language torn from the pages of the good book. You weaponized religion, and you wonder why I'm leaving to find Jesus on the wrong side of your walls. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Come home, come home. You're better than this. Oh, you taught me better than this. Come home, come home. You're better than this. I used to think you were better than this. Come home, come home, oh. Maybe I was too naive, or I just didn't want to see that there's always been a little poison in the well. Our churches sit on stolen land, a nation built by stolen hands, and we use the Bible to justify it all. Yeah, from slavery and segregation to mass deportation. This is who we are, but not who we have to be. There's a lot of work to do to pull up the evil by the roots, but repentance has to come before there's peace. You said to love the lost, I'm trying to love you now. You said to speak the truth, that's why I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. May love overcome and justice roll down. May love overcome and justice roll down. Overcome and justice roll down. Thank you so much.
I'll give you about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to turn and talk to somebody around you. Some people are sort of full up. Maybe you need to go to the bathroom. I don't know, whatever you need to do. Just going to give you a minute. There's been taken in a lot. So talk to each other for a minute. Sort of turn, let yourself breathe for a minute, and then I'll call you back here together in just a minute. All right, it's my privilege to introduce to you some people by video here that sometimes when we travel or when we do our work, you have a chance to meet. One of them is named Amanda Tyler. Amanda runs a group called the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. If you're unfamiliar with the American Baptists, you might see the words Baptist for Religious Liberty and think, you know, the Falwell crowd. But the American Baptists are not like that at all. This is Thomas Jefferson's crowd. These people have been fighting for religious liberty from religion and for religion all along and all that. And Amanda is executive director and started a project called Christians Against Christian Nationalism. I jumped right on it when I knew it existed in 2019. We were doing that work, and then the insurrection happened, and we all got busy, and Amanda's a great friend and a mentor of mine, and she was willing to come onto a video that we did, which became the basis of our video curriculum, where Christy and Stephanie and I interviewed Amanda, along with a bunch of other people, subsequent weeks just after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol under Christian nationalism auspices. And so that video curriculum is what exists as one of the resources on our website. So longer forms of these interviews and all of that exists, and it's also part of our podcast and the rest if you want to share it with other people. Or we're also recording this. It's also going to be on the church's live stream on YouTube and Facebook, and also on our Vote Common Good places. So if you want this exact thing we're doing tonight, you can just watch it again or share with a friend, but also the work that Amanda does. So Stephanie is a pastor, Christy is also a pastor, and so they're all part of our speaking team and our work and all the stuff that we do. And this is Amanda Tyler. Amanda has some really great contributions. So if you haven't yet gone to votecommongood.com, get on our email list and all that stuff. We'd love to stay in touch with you and see all our curriculum. And also go on to Christians Against Christian Nationalism, because they have great resources, and she's going to mention one of those here. And this is Amanda Tyler.
I think that's really a vital point, because we should have a common understanding about what we're talking about as far as Christian nationalism goes. And I'm going to point to the statement that's available at christiansagainstchristiannationalism.org. You know, the work that we did back in 2019 was about providing an advocacy platform for people who were interested in learning more and for taking a public stand. And the centerpiece of the project is a statement. And in the statement itself, we define Christian nationalism as a political ideology that seeks to merge our identities as Americans and Christians. So a few things here. You know, one, we are specifically talking in the American context. This is something that comes up. This is not particular to the United States, but in our work, we are really focusing on the American expression of Christian nationalism. And so we talk explicitly about American and Christian identities. But we also want to distinguish that Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Christian nationalism is a political ideology. Christianity is a religion. That said, you can't totally divorce Christianity out of it. It'd be great just to say, oh, this has nothing to do with Christianity. Yeah. That would be really easy, right? That's not accurate. And that's because Christian nationalism uses the narratives and the symbols, and in some cases even the theology of Christianity to further this political ideology. But as we define Christian nationalism, it is not itself a religion. It is more about identity than religion in a lot of ways. And we get at this in one of our resources that we have available at Christians Against Christian Nationalism, a really handy one-pager that your guests last week, Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry, helped us put together, called What is Christian Nationalism? And we talk about how it's more identity than religion. When we define Christian nationalism, I think it's also important to say what it's not. It's not patriotism. Patriotism is a love of country, and we can show our love of country in a number of different ways. We can wave an American flag, we can protest in the streets, we can exercise our constitutional rights, right? These are all different ways to be patriotic. Nationalism is a love of country that also requires an allegiance to it above everything else, including our theological views. And so when our theological view, when our patriotism starts to ask us to sacrifice our theological views, that's no longer patriotism, that's nationalism. and particularly as we're talking about here, Christian nationalism.
Yeah, so really great. I just couldn't commend to you more Amanda Tyler and the work that she's doing and what they do. In this second part, we're going to try to now have you hear from people who talk about and understand what Christian nationalism is. Because one of the great requirements of empathy is that you feel that you have confidence of understanding. So we want you to know there's people like Amanda and Stephanie and Christy and our organization and others where people know, and there are resources for you, and you're part of a community. You're part of a grand voice of people that know and understand some things. And you don't have to remember everything. You have some friends who know what's going on. Amanda would be glad for you to reach out. We want you to feel like you're part of a group of people who are knowing and understanding what's going on. That's one of the great points of what individuals can do. We're also going to introduce you to the people who wrote this book. Amanda referred to them, Sam Perry and Andrew Whitehead. They wrote a book called Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States. They're sociologists who are describing it, and frankly are describing it as a problem. Taking America Back for God is not a how-to plan. It's a book about the problem with Christian nationalism, right? But you might not know that if you're just browsing through, Amazon or something. Well, one of the things that they've done, and you're going to hear Andrew talk about this briefly, is there are some of the people that take the Pew surveys plus other surveys to find out where Americans are on issues of Christian nationalism. So they have this set of questions that they ask, and depending on where someone answers a particular question, as if they mostly agree, partially agree, totally disagree, that kind of thing on a scale, right, a 1 to 5 response, then they get a point value, and the point value then puts them on a spectrum of against Christian nationalism, for Christian nationalism, or somewhere in between. If you want to take that test, you can go to votecommongood.com or to confrontingchristiannationalism.com. We have a website just for this curriculum, and the actual survey is there, this same survey. You could take it, you could send it to your friends. We love having people send it around like, hey, how Christian nationalist are you? Take this survey and get your answer. It's shocking how many people don't end up 0 on it, right? You want to, but sometimes the questions can feel a little tricky, and they're not trying to be tricky, but it's how people end up. It's things like cities should be allowed to put public religious symbols on public property, yes or no, or the Constitution was inspired by God, or the federal government should advocate Christian values. These kinds of questions. Where do you find yourself on this? You know, that Bible that Trump pitched, not the one he held up when he was trying to clear the place, but the one he was selling to people, the thing that's offensive about it isn't that Donald Trump's selling the Bible. Who cares? Donald Trump's selling, he sells all kinds of stuff. To me, the insulting part was, it's called the Patriot Bible. Inside the text includes the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. There's a confusion between the words written by the founders, the words in ancient texts and scriptures. And they put it all together in one package. Classic Christian nationalism move. So it's questions that get people to say, what do you think about stuff like that? So that's how they answer it. And then again, it ends people up on a spectrum. Andrew's going to reference this. He's going to reference these categories from rejectors. That's people who in the survey would have scored 0 to 5. Meaning you reject Christian nationalism. All the way over to the far side where there's ambassadors, you would score a 21 to 24, meaning you're pushing for it. The Watchmen people on the screen there, Josh Hawley, Lauren Boebert, those crowd, they would be ambassadors. Most of you, because you're here, have probably indicated you'd be down in the 0 to 4 or 5 number. But most people are somewhere in here. 50% or more of the population scores a 12 or higher. That they're accommodators to this. So they're going to talk about that, just like you to see it, because it comes pretty fast. They're sociologists, they're super bright, they're doing a whole lot of things. If you've seen the God and Country film yet, Andrew is in that film, so he's one of the people, that's one of the spokespeople, and so is Sam Perry. So they're common spokespeople for this. And this little bit that they have is really great. Again, you can watch their whole hour-long interview we did with them. I think it's super fascinating, not because of what I said or Stephanie or Christy, but because of what Andrew and Sam had to say.
Yeah, well, I'll dive in first and then let Sam finish it off. So in our book, we performed or were able to get data on these large national surveys, and we asked respondents 6 different questions where they could strongly disagree to strongly agree with them. things like, the United States is part of God's plan, or the federal government should advocate Christian values, or declare the U.S. a Christian nation. And so the degree to which people strongly agreed with those or strongly disagreed, we assigned them point values, and we're able to create a scale by adding all those different questions together. And we did that because it's really important to understand that Christian nationalism isn't a binary, yes or no, but that Americans really are all along a spectrum where some embrace it really strongly. Some, see, Christianity being a part of what we do in the U.S. is important, and others kind of resist that, or the rejectors who we see on the very end of the scale say, there should be no fusion of this type of Christianity, which we define in our book is really this idea of a white, conservative, natural-born citizen. That's the Christian that they're talking about. American civil society shouldn't be fused to this type of Christianity. And so when we're able to create that scale, we can now look at, well, how do these respondents view the world? And there were three basic things that we tried to do throughout the book and were our main takeaways. Is the first, that Christian nationalism matters. And so Sam, he'll be able to share, even with his more recent data, that when we're looking at anti-democratic attitudes, or we're looking at policing of African Americans, if we're looking at immigration, if we're looking at refugees, if we're looking at religious minorities, we're looking at all these different important hot-button issues, Christian nationalism consistently matters. Over and above whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're an evangelical or a mainline Protestant or unaffiliated, whether you attend church a lot or you believe the Bible should be read literally, when we account for all those things, Christian nationalism is still consistently one of the most important predictors. So what that tells us is that this is a key lens through which Americans view their social worlds. Whether they embrace it or reject it, it is doing work in how people are interacting with their world. The second thing we find is that Christian nationalism is not only really important, but it's an actual thing. And I just use kind of this, non-sociological language here, because it isn't just racism, it isn't just conservative politics, it isn't just authoritarianism, but that it is something different. It's its own thing, and so we're studying that. And then our final kind of main finding is that Christian nationalism does not necessarily equal being religious or being evangelical or being a faithful Christian, because we find that those that reject Christian nationalism but maybe attend an evangelical Protestant church, they look completely different from fellow evangelicals who might embrace Christian nationalism really strongly. And so this is something that cuts across religious traditions. So if you're a white Catholic or a white mainline Protestant who embraces Christian nationalism, the likelihood that you really support the insurrectionists is equally high to white evangelicals, what we're finding. And so this is something that really operates across religious traditions. And so those are some of the key kind of points we make in the book. But Sam's been collecting some amazing data lately. And so, yeah, Sam, I'll let you share just a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish off the discussion of the book, though, I think the way the book progresses is we describe how really Christian nationalism worships at the holy trinity of power, boundaries, and order. It values three things primarily: power, and making sure that our group stays in power and is able to maintain that power. We demonstrate that in the book through its Christian nationalist support of Donald Trump and his policies and his brand of politics. And we've been able to demonstrate that in subsequent studies as well. That Christian nationalism, and especially white Christian nationalism, is very concerned with maintaining proper boundaries between us and them. That's really one of the things that Christian nationalism boils down to, is marking off who is the us that has the rightful power in the United States and who is the them that we oppose and want to make sure that we marginalize or oppress or drive out. And then the last one is order. Christian nationalism at its core longs to establish and reinforce a very particular traditionalist social order in which everybody recognizes their proper place in the family, in society, in the church. And so it manifests in a variety of ways, but really that's kind of the breakdown of the book, is how Christian nationalism reinforces and worships at that holy trinity of power, boundaries, and order.
Starting to come together, right? Power, boundaries, and order. Our country, not theirs, they said inside the Senate dais. J.D. Vance saying people with children who parent the way I think should have more of a voice in our democracy than those who don't. This is what Christian nationalism looks like and how it functions in our world. You can go to the How Christian Nationalist Am I at the Confronting Christian Nationalism website if you want to do that. All right, there's 5 basic beliefs that a lot of Christian nationalists will articulate when you ask them why they hold to Christian nationalism. So if you're somebody that likes a list, this is our listly on the kinds of things that cause someone to like this. So lots of cameras come out at this point. The belief that the country was started as a Christian nation. That's really in there. If you're going to talk to people about it, or if you're going to try to understand, or you're going to try to engage with some empathy and understanding and curiosity, it's going to come up. Brief yourself on how do I answer that question? Maybe it's when are we starting? What do you do with the establishment clause? You just find some things. Questions are really great, but so is questions about what about, that really helps. And so does why, what does that do for you to believe that? Sometimes just asking somebody flat out, you seem really mad. Does it help you to be mad about it? That kind of stuff. Or saying to them, that freaks me out. Really scares me if you get scared by it. So engage with people about the question, does it start? Number 2, is there unbelievable confusion between the word church and the people? Pastors know this pretty well. Because a lot of us pastors have been spending a lot of time saying to our congregations for a very long time, the church isn't the institution only. The church isn't only the building. The church isn't the sacrament. The church is the people. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union. When do the people form the more perfect union as the government? And when is the church the people? And what if it's the same people? Then what do we do? This confusion happens all the time. Should we be a Christian nationalist country, the Congresswoman has asked? Yes, I think we should always put God first. The government shouldn't tell the church what to do. The people of the church should tell the government what to do. These people should tell those people, and what if we're the same peoples? Okay, so it's a thing. This is where I would suggest saying to them, we have a common struggle in the United States. We don't know what to do with the church and the people, and where's the steeple and where are the people thing, that whole deal. And to share the struggle with the Christian nationalists. You're in the project with them of what do we mean by being an American. Can really help when you feel like you're on the same side. You might disagree on where you're going. Like you and your life partner deciding where you're going to go on vacation. You're going somewhere, you're just not sure if you're going this way or that way. But at least you're in the project together. It's really different than, I'm pretty sure you want to hurt me. We've traveled much of the country. We stood down at Eagle Pass, Texas, Dan and I, in just a fleet of passion when we found out that a bunch of Christian truckers were going to go down to Eagle Pass, Texas in January. Remember hearing about that with a thing called God's Army? They were going to drive a bunch of trucks down there and put a militia on the border. Well, Dan lives in Michigan. I live in Minneapolis. We have a bus out there that we just got, and we're like, oh, they're going to load up a bunch of diesel vehicles and drive down to Texas? So are we. So we went down there and started engaging with all these people, and we're engaging with them at every possible place and cross point. And the level of confusion about who they are and what they're up to and whose country it is amazing. The third is this view of seeing the United States as the new Israel. Going to be theological for a minute, and if you're not into that, go ahead and step out of, mentally for a minute. But here's the thing. A lot of times Christians have had to try to figure out, what do we do with the Jewish part of our sacred text? The First Testament, the Old Testament, the Jewish scripture. What do we do with all that stuff about Israel? Well, some Christian theologies have said the church is the new Israel. That which was promised to the nation of Israel in the First Testament, Jewish text, Old Testament, is what we say to the church. Some people say it's what it says to me. These people say it's what is said to the nation of Israel is said to the United States. 2 Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and will pray, I will heal their land. spoken to the nation of Israel. Does that apply to the church, or does it apply to the United States of America? When countries or states or counties call for a day of prayer and use 2 Chronicles, they're applying it to the United States. So in Christian nationalism movement, there becomes a church and people confusion, and then a who is the nation of Israel now confusion. What you'll often see with Christian nationalists is an overuse of ancient Jewish texts and ideas and metaphors. Very little Jesus, very little Christianity of the New Testament, and a whole lot of nation of Israel promises. Donald Trump doesn't have to be like Jesus because he's like King Cyrus. Okay? Always borrowing. A lot of Esther. A lot of Esther. Fourth is a holy war narrative. That our battle is not against principalities or against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. And those powers and principalities come out in wokeness and, non-petroleum cars and all the rest of this stuff. And it's all good versus evil and God's law versus human law over and over and over. You'll hear this kind of thing happening. To know that this is a big deal for people and start to figure out, what are you going to say about it? If you're one of those people like me, you've got a child that's in this world, they're going to bring this stuff up. And then the role of the United States as God's primary plan in the 7 mountains to evangelize the world. All right, one last illustration for you out of all this. Here's Michael Flynn. You might know Michael Flynn as the person who was convicted of crimes against the United States of America by the Justice Department, then run by the Trump administration, and sent to prison, and then pardoned by that very president. And now he travels around and uses all of that as feature and not flaw, just like the QAnon shaman does. And he has a whole movement of people and has started a thing called the Reawaken America tours. So we're going to show you this a little bit because it's important to see how all this stuff ties together. And then we have a little bit where we visited one of the Reawaken America tours. But this, by the way, was put together by the AP and played on PBS. And so there's a whole thing called Michael Flynn's Holy War. If you subscribe to PBS, like me, you look like the PBS crowd. I subscribe to PBS, so you too could watch it when you go home tonight or tomorrow. In your PBS app, even. Michael Flynn's Holy War. Don't watch it tonight, you need to sleep. Wait till tomorrow when you have time to worry. So here's a little excerpt.
General Michael Flynn, ladies and gentlemen.
Michael Flynn's political influence has only grown since the January 6th insurrection.
Tomorrow, we the people are going to be here, and we want you to know that we will not stand for a lie.
General Flynn, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America?
The fifth.
Flynn has endorsed around 100 candidates for federal, state, and even local offices, raised millions, and helped launch the Reawaken America tour that mixes politics and religion.
I mean, there is a spiritual war and there is a political war. And they are going on. They're going on in this country right now. Since the November Virginia election across the country, we have overturned 200 school boards in this country. 200.
So Flynn is getting in front of audiences and he's using Christian nationalist rhetoric to rally people who want to be fed that because they want to be excited, mobilized.
They're going to shut our churches down, and they're going to tell you, you're going to get mandated to do this, you're going to get mandated to do that.
Christian nationalism threatens democracy because it is fundamentally anti-democratic by nature. It doesn't prioritize the incorporation or the participation of all Americans.
They say you're a Christian nationalist. Are you?
What is that? I'm an Irish Catholic.
We should skip that question. He's an Irish Catholic general who served
I'm a follower of Jesus. How's that?
33 years in the military serving his country.
Michael Flynn was asked that question back when, are you a Christian nationalist? You were supposed to say, I don't know what that is. I don't think that's a thing. That's something that the left made up and the media pushes on us. They've shifted since then to Josh Hawley saying, the media is going to say I'm a Christian nationalist. You better believe I am. They've moved in their position on that. But he gave that kind of answer. Michael Flynn is one of these great examples of the kind of work that they're doing. Now look, Michael Flynn has every right to travel the country and tell people what he thinks of the world and how they should act. I'm not telling Michael Flynn to be quiet or to stop having his events. In fact, we go to their events and we engage in their events. Here's one. We walked into the tent, and the person on the stage was one of those guys that was on the stage at the Watchman Tower thing. He's explaining why people should vote for Donald Trump, and Michael Flynn was the next speaker, but I couldn't handle Michael Flynn. So I just happened to walk in, had my camera on, and was making stuff, and here they are in live and real action saying this kind of stuff.
Cyrus, whom I've
Walking
anointed,
into the
doesn't even know the Lord.
Great Awakening.
Because all the Christians, if you ever talk to Christians during an election cycle, here's what they care about. Is he a Christian? Is he a Christian? They want to know if their candidate's a Christian. Is he a Christian? Let me tell you something. One of the worst presidents we ever had was Jimmy Carter, and he was a Christian. The question you should be asking isn't, is he a Christian? You should ask, is he anointed and chosen by God for the job? No, you're not getting a choir boy. But I'm telling you something prophetically. As I sat there, that anointing that was on Kim came upon me, and I was shook up.
So here's the thing. A lot of times these Christian nationalist preachers talk about a prophetic voice. That's a really important bit. And maybe it's hard to put all together, but he's saying that because he has a prophetic calling, prophetic voice, he will know how to determine if someone is chosen by God or not. And that's the thing, that when these Christian nationalists say we should only have leaders that are anointed by God, they typically mean their God, of course, and their understanding of God. So what they're doing is saying that the God of the universe has put someone who believes and thinks the way they do into a position of power, and therefore you can't argue against it. That's the heart of the Christian nationalist prophetic narrative.
The way Christian nationalism spreads across the country is much more like this. Small little places and all the rest of it. And then guys like, Pat Robertson and some of the rest, but I won't burden you with Pat Robertson. Okay, so for churches, what can churches do? Here's a suggestion. We could start to see all of this as part of spiritual formation. Look, conservative, right-wing leading Christian nationalist churches think that indoctrinating people into Christian nationalist understanding is part of their spiritual formation. If we believe that Christianity needs to speak to Christian nationalism and tell it that it is outside the bounds of the Christian faith and the American expression, could we find ways to make that part of our spiritual formation process as Christians? I would suggest, having been a preacher for most of my adult life, the sermon is not the best place to do that. Any of the preachers in the room? The sermon's not the best place to do a lot of things. The sermon has a very particular function and form. There's many other environments that people in our communities could be in. Discussion groups, book groups, films, conversations, groups that travel to other places and see things, or interviews that you're doing. There's a lot of ways to engage, and there's a lot of better spiritual formation practices than just the sermon as well. So we would encourage you to make civic understanding and involvement in the discipleship project. If we stop talking about what's the role of our civic engagements as people of faith, and we only allow people on Christian nationalist side to say things in public or to our communities or on the internet, people will tend to believe the things they hear compared to believing the things they don't hear. It's about as basic understanding as someone could say to you without being, overly reductionistic. People tend not to believe the things that you don't say to them. So we could engage in this stuff. We could find ways. And it's so uncomfortable. But we have to find ways to do it, because if you have a grandchild like I do, or children at home, sometimes you just have to talk about Bruno. And if you're unfamiliar with that, the whole let's just not talk about this in church thing, it's not working very well. We've got ourselves in a pickle, and it's time to talk about it. So I commend any of you for coming out, especially on, what day is it today? It's Monday. On a Monday night, for coming out on a Monday night to something like this. Thank you. Thanks for sharing it. Thanks for being concerned about it. I know you may have been brought here by fear and not opportunity, but whatever it is, we're glad that you're here. All right. Also, for organizations, what can we do? Civic organizations, community organizations. Our democracy has to be about all of us, I would suggest. Not just some of us. maybe 50% of our population leans into being Christian nationalists. And they're Americans too. Maybe we could nudge a few of them along the spectrum a bit. Maybe we could love them anyway. But if we keep doing the 50% plus one, if civic organizations just are only about mobilizing our people for action, it's going to leave us a little sour in the end. There could be an imagination of a democracy for all. Now, what do we do about that? Can a Christian nationalist also be the Speaker of the House of Representatives? Well, the answer to that is we have one right now. So, yeah. Mike Johnson is a Christian person who's wrong about a lot of things. We have this little joke when we talk about Trump or we talk about Mike Johnson or we talk about candidates we're with. We're like, look, as a Christian, as a person, somebody who follows the teachings of Jesus, I really believe Mike Johnson is a beloved child of God. As Jesus said it, the hope of the world, the salt and the light, salt of the earth, light of the world. But not every light of the world should be the Speaker of the House of Representatives and he needs to take his dim little light and stop bothering the good people of America, right? Really do mean that. Like, yes, he's an American and he's part of it, but he shouldn't be running everything. Or even running that. So we have a process for that. Let's get busy and use that process. But he's also us. Loving our fellow neighbor, friend, enemy, whatever, that's what we're up to. So civic organizations, let's prod them to have democracy for all and not just 50% plus one. What can individuals do? Well, as we said it already, curiosity and engagement. Why does it matter? What's going on there? What's eating Gilbert Grape here? What's happening with this family member, this friend, this person? What are they up to? What's got them moving? Sometimes we get to this point and I'm like, I don't know if curiosity and engagement to lead us to empathy is enough. And then when I really think about it, I'm like, I think that could be the best thing we do. As individuals, person to person, to really be curious and to engage with our neighbors and our friends. Yesterday, we ran an event with a candidate over in Oglesburg or Orisburg, can't remember the name of it, Pennsylvania. And we're with a candidate, and there was a little confusion between our organization and theirs about who was going to ask permission to be at this closed restaurant parking lot. So nobody asked. So we show up and we set up, and it's got our bus and it's got Faith, Hope, and Love big flags, and there's a bunch of chairs we have out and umbrellas and all this stuff, and 50 people or so gathering out there, and a person running as a Democrat for the state house in Pennsylvania here in the 124th district. And the owner of the restaurant comes pulling up in his truck. I didn't know who it was. He got out of his truck and he came walking over to me, and he had a cowboy hat on and cowboy boots, and he got out of an F-150. And he goes, what the heck's going on here? And I said, hey, I'm Doug, we're running this thing. He said, well, I'm the owner. And I said, well, thanks so much for having us. And he goes, what are you doing here? And then I said, well, we're having this campaign event for this person. He said, well, is she a Democrat or Republican? I said, she's running as a Democrat. He goes, pack up and get out of here. I'm a Christian, conservative, Trump-loving, gun-toting, truck-driving, person. Get off my property. I was like, okay, something's gone wrong here. And I said, all right, I hear you. We'll start getting packed up. And he goes, is she here? I said, yeah, she's a person right over there. And he goes, well, you guys are all set up. I'll let you stay. Can I meet her? I said, sure, come on over. Walks over and meets this person running for the House of Representatives, State House in his district. His name's Chris. He let us stay in his parking lot. Opposed to everything we're up to. Doesn't want her to win. Doesn't know who we are. Doesn't know why we're in his parking lot. We don't know why we're in his parking lot. The campaign is like, why are we in this parking lot? We're like, yeah, why are we in this parking lot? What are we doing here? He then gets on his mower and starts mowing all the property all around it, not to disturb us, but he's just got stuff to do. It's Sunday. He's out doing his chores. After it gets all done, went over to him and brought a couple of beers and said, if I paid him to rent his lot, which we would have done anyway. Said, I have 2 beers. You can have both of them, or if you want to have one with me, we got to. He goes, yeah, let's go over in the shade and sit there. So we went over and sat outside of our bus under the awning, and Chris and I, almost the same age, start talking about what we're up to and what we're doing and the church he goes to and how we both feel like America is being torn apart in ways that feel really hard and sad, and we don't know where it's going to go, and that religion is used to divide people. And we have different views on it, and I want some people to win, he wants the other people to win, but we both agreed we're going to be living next to each other in this country, regardless of who wins, and we can't see each other as enemies and fearful of each other anymore. And Chris was so kind to us. And I kept asking myself, if I owned a piece of property and a bunch of Trump people pulled up to run a Christian nationalist effort, and I kind of wondered who loved their enemy yesterday. By the end, I think we both did. I think we actually kind of became friends and said, this is great. And I said, my wife and I think about buying property, like this, because she's a yoga instructor and we want to have like a place where there's music and food and kind of a bar and a yoga studio. And he's like, you should buy my place, because he's moving to South Carolina. Like today he's moving to South Carolina. He had a whole trailer loaded up. He's like, I'm getting out of Pennsylvania. I can't stand the politics here. I'm going to South Carolina. He said, you should buy my place. It was for sale. That's why it was closed, because we're moving to South Carolina. And it was just slightly refreshing. Started out with pack up and get out of here, to you should buy this place. My place should become yours for a price. Huh? Maybe we can be okay. And these people shouldn't be in representative form of democracy and shouldn't be elected to office. So whatever you do to do something like that. We're going to be back here in Pennsylvania, in this part of Pennsylvania, throughout the fall. We're going to spend most of our time in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, a little bit in Arizona and California. We do events like this. We also do outdoor rallies and events, sometimes with candidates, sometimes just with faith voters, getting them all riled up and that kind of thing. So please get on our email list. You can sign up on a card out there or go onto our website and sign up. We'll be in touch with you by email or text. Don't worry, we're not the kind of group that emails you twice a week. We email 4 times a week, honest to goodness we do. We really do. We do 4 times a week. We're not going to love you and leave you. We're not going to leave you behind. We're going to remember you. We want you to remember us. We do a little roundup. We send you a couple things. We send you some good stories. We introduce you to candidates all over the country. It's a little bit of common good. We hope it's a little bit of common good news for you. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks for being a part of all of this. That's Joel. This is Dan. You already heard from Rob. You'll also see Donnie and Tim out there, and other people join us. And if you do want to just be part of the merry band of common do-gooders that are traveling around the country when we come back, be in touch. And we do caravan with people and a bunch of other things. So it's super fun to get out on the road and to go meeting all kinds of people. So thanks for being with us tonight.